The chandelier above her head cost more than most families earned in a lifetime, but Alara Vance knew it could fall and crush her at any moment. Metaphorically speaking, of course. She stood in the center of the Ashford Grand Ballroom, her hand resting lightly on her husband's arm, feeling nothing. 8 years of this. 8 years of smiling at people who smiled back with knives behind their teeth. And tonight, someone had finally decided to use theirs. The woman's voice cut through the string quartet like shattering glass. "Rowan, darling, we need to talk. Now!" Every head turned, every conversation stopped, and Alara felt the floor tilt beneath her expensive shoes, waiting for the humiliation she'd somehow always known was coming. If you want to see how far a woman can fall, and how high she can climb when she's done falling, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Winter Gala at Ashford Hall was the kind of event where people came to be seen, not to enjoy themselves. Alara had learned this distinction early in her marriage. She'd also learned that the temperature in these grand ballrooms had nothing to do with the fireplaces and everything to do with the company. Tonight, the air was Arctic. She adjusted the diamonds at her throat, a wedding gift from Rowan's mother, who'd made it clear they were on loan, not truly Alara's, and watched her husband work the room. That's what he did best. Rowan Vance, Duke of Thornfield, moved through high society like a shark through water, efficient, predatory, and utterly at home. "You look miserable, darling." Alara turned to find Lady Beatrice Harlow, one of the few women in this crowd who spoke to her like a person instead of a curiosity. "I look the same as I always do." "Exactly my point." Beatrice sipped her champagne, her eyes tracking Rowan across the room. 8 years, Alara. When are you going to stop pretending this marriage is anything other than what it is? And what is it, Beatrice? A transaction that's gone stale. Alara said nothing. What could she say? Beatrice wasn't wrong. Her marriage to Rowan had been arranged, not in the old-fashioned sense of parents trading children like livestock, but in the modern, socially acceptable way where families made strategic alliances and called it romance. Her father, Earl Vincent Ashford, had been desperate to secure his position after a series of bad investments. Rowan's family had wanted connections to the coastal holdings Alara's mother had brought to the Ashford name, so they'd married, at a beautiful ceremony, with beautiful words that meant nothing. "There's still time to leave, you know," Beatrice said quietly. "Plenty of women do it now. Divorce isn't the scandal it used to be." "Divorce is always a scandal when your husband is a duke." Alara took a glass of champagne from a passing server, more to have something to hold than to drink. "And I'm not built for scandal, Beatrice. You know that." "No, you're built for survival, which is worse, honestly. At least scandal is interesting." Before Alara could respond, the string quartet hit a sour note. Or rather, a woman's laugh did, sharp and familiar enough to make several heads turn toward the ballroom entrance. Alara's stomach dropped. Victoria Ashworth had arrived. She swept into the room like she owned it, which in a sense she did. Or at least she owned everyone's attention. Victoria was everything Alara wasn't. Bold where Alara was careful, passionate where Alara was controlled, willing to burn bridges where Alara built walls to protect herself. And once, a very long time ago, Victoria had been Rowan's lover. "Oh, hell," Beatrice muttered. "Someone should have checked the guest list." "It's fine," Alara said automatically, though her fingers had tightened around her champagne glass enough to hurt. "It's not fine. Everyone knows about her and Rowan. Everyone knows she left him because she wouldn't be a political wife. And now she's here, looking like that, and you're... I'm what?" Beatrice had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You're exactly what she refused to be." The words landed like a slap, mostly because they were true. Alara had spent 8 years being the perfect duchess. Gracious, composed, undemanding. She attended the right events, supported the right causes, and never ever caused problems. She was everything a duke's wife should be. She was also deeply, profoundly unhappy. But unhappiness was private. Unhappiness was something you dealt with in your own rooms, in your own time, with no witnesses. It wasn't something you brought to a gala where 300 people were watching for any sign of weakness. Victoria spotted Rowan across the room. Her face lit up in a way that made Alara's chest constrict, because that was real. Whatever was happening on Victoria's face, the joy, the hunger, The absolute certainty that she had every right to be here and to want what she wanted. That was real in a way Alara's carefully maintained composure would never be. "Rowan, darling," Victoria's voice carried beautifully. Of course it did. Everything about Victoria was designed to carry, to command, to take up space. Rowan turned. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Regret? Alara couldn't tell. She'd never been good at reading her husband's expressions, mostly because he'd never given her much to read. "Victoria." His voice was neutral, polite, the same tone he used with everyone, including Alara. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" Victoria crossed the distance between them with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her welcome anywhere. "I heard you were hosting. I couldn't resist." The conversations around them had died. Every eye in the room was on this little drama, waiting to see what would happen, waiting to see if the Duke of Thornfield would embarrass his wife in front of 300 witnesses. Alara set down her champagne glass carefully. Her hands were steady. That was something, at least. "How lovely to see you again, Miss Ashworth." The words came out perfectly measured, perfectly pleasant. Years of practice made them easy. "It's been quite some time." Victoria's gaze slid to her, and there it was, the pity. The kind of pity you gave someone who didn't know they'd already lost. "Lady Vance, still playing Duchess, I see." Playing. As if Alara's entire life was a performance. As if the last 8 years of duty and sacrifice and swallowed down loneliness were just a role she'd taken on for fun. "I don't play at anything, Miss Ashworth. I simply am." "Right, you simply are." Victoria's smile sharpened. "Rowan, darling, can we talk privately?" The ballroom had gone completely silent now. Even the quartet had stopped playing. 300 people held their collective breath, waiting to see if the Duke would abandon his wife to have a private conversation with his former lover. Rowan's jaw tightened. It was a small tell, but Alara had learned to watch for the small things. After 8 years, she'd become an expert in reading the tiny cracks in his armor. "This isn't the time or place, Victoria." "There's never a good time or place, is there? Not for us. Not for anything real." Victoria's voice dropped, but not enough. She wanted people to hear this. She wanted the scandal. "I made a mistake leaving you. I thought freedom was worth more than love. I was wrong." Someone gasped. It might have been Alara. She wasn't sure. "You need to leave," Rowan said quietly. "I need you to tell me you don't feel anything anymore. I need you to look me in the eye and tell me that this—" Victoria gestured around the ballroom at the wealth and the power and the carefully orchestrated perfection of it all, "is worth more than what we had." Alara's vision had started to narrow at the edges. She was going to faint, or scream, or do something equally catastrophic and unforgivable. Instead, she did what she always did. She stood perfectly still and waited for it to be over. Rowan's hand found hers. She startled at the touch. He never touched her in public unless it was absolutely necessary, but his fingers laced through hers with surprising firmness. "What we had ended a long time ago, Victoria. I'm married now, to Alara, and that's not going to change." The disappointment in Victoria's eyes was matched only by the disappointment Alara felt in her own chest. Because he'd chosen her, he'd chosen their marriage. But not because he loved her, not because he wanted her. He'd chosen duty over passion, obligation over love. He'd chosen the cage. Victoria's face hardened. "You're a coward, Rowan Vance. You've always been a coward. You traded everything that mattered for a title and a cold bed and a wife who doesn't even know why she's here. That's enough." Rowan's voice had gone sharp, dangerous. The tone he used in council meetings when someone had overstepped. "You will leave now, or I will have you escorted out." Victoria looked between them at Rowan's closed expression and Alara's frozen face, and laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. "Enjoy your perfect life, Duchess. I hope it keeps you warm at night." She left. The crowd parted for her like water, then immediately closed in, whispering, judging, savoring every moment of the drama they'd just witnessed. Alara stood there, Rowan's hand still holding hers, and felt absolutely nothing. "We should dance," Rowan said quietly. "Show them everything's fine." "Is it?" The words came out before she could stop them. "Is everything fine?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment she thought he might actually answer honestly. It is what it is, Alara. We both know that. Yes, they both knew that. The problem was she was starting to realize that what it is was no longer something she could live with. But she let him lead her onto the dance floor anyway. Let him put one hand on her waist and take her other hand in his. Let the music start and the performance continue. Because that's what she did. That's who she was. The Duchess of Thornfield, playing her part perfectly, dying slowly inside where no one could see. The carriage ride home was silent. Rowan stared out the window at the snow-covered streets of the capital, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he refused to speak. Alara kept her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. When they arrived at Vance's house, Rowan helped her down from the carriage with the same careful politeness he always used, like she was fragile, or maybe just breakable. "I have work to do in my study," he said as they entered the grand foyer. "Don't wait up." He never asked her to wait up. She never did. Alara climbed the stairs to her rooms alone, let her maid help her out of the gown and the diamonds and all the other trappings of her position, and finally, she was alone. She sat at her dressing table and stared at her reflection. 30 years old. Still beautiful, people said, though she could see the tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there when she'd married. Still poised, still perfect, still utterly, completely alone. A soft knock at the door made her turn. "Come in." Her maid, Sarah, entered with a sealed letter on a silver tray. "This just arrived for you, my lady. The messenger said it was urgent." Alara took the letter, frowning at the unfamiliar seal. She broke it open and read the contents once, twice, her hands beginning to shake. "Lady Vance, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to inform you of certain irregularities in the marriage contract executed between the Vance and Ashford families 8 years ago. Specifically, I have discovered evidence that the marriage was not merely a social alliance, but part of a broader political agreement involving debt forgiveness and territorial concessions. Your father's financial difficulties were far more severe than publicly known. The Duke of Thornfield agreed to marry you in exchange for the settlement of your father's debts and certain advantages in the coastal trade routes your mother's family controlled. In short, Lady Vance, you were collateral in a business transaction. I felt you had the right to know the truth of your situation. If you wish to discuss this matter further, I am at your disposal. Sincerely, Marcus Aldridge, former counsel to the Ashford estate. Alara read the letter a third time, her chest constricting with each word. Collateral, business transaction, debt, forgiveness. She thought of her father's relief when she'd agreed to marry Rowan. She thought of her mother's quiet sadness at the wedding. She thought of 8 years of duty and silence and pretending everything was fine. She thought of Victoria Ashworth's words, "A wife who doesn't even know why she's here." Alara stood, crossed to the fireplace, and held the letter over the flames. One flick of her wrist, and it would burn. The truth would disappear. She could go back to not knowing, to surviving in her gilded cage, to playing the role she'd been assigned. Her hand trembled. Then she pulled the letter back, folded it carefully, and placed it in the locked drawer of her writing desk. Because Victoria had been wrong about one thing. Alara knew exactly why she was here. The question was whether she was going to stay. The next morning, Alara woke to find Rowan already gone. Not unusual. He kept his own schedule, his own rooms, his own life. They intersected only when duty demanded it. She dressed carefully, ate breakfast alone in her sitting room, and tried to decide what to do with the knowledge burning a hole through her carefully constructed composure. Confront Rowan? Demand the truth? What would that accomplish? He'd either confirm it, which would destroy what little remained of her dignity, or deny it and make her seem hysterical. Neither option was acceptable. She was staring at her untouched tea when Sarah knocked again. "My lady, you have a visitor. Lady Beatrice Harlow is in the drawing room." Alara almost smiled. Trust Beatrice to appear exactly when needed. She found her friend pacing the drawing room like a caged animal. The moment Alara entered, Beatrice whirled on her. "Are you all right? Please tell me you're all right. I didn't sleep at all last night worrying about you." "I'm fine, Beatrice." "You're not fine. No one would be fine after that disaster last night. Victoria Ashworth should be banned from polite society. Actually, she should be launched into the sea." Despite everything, Alara felt a small laugh escape. That seems excessive. Does it? She humiliated you in front of everyone. And Rowan, Beatrice stopped, her expression shifting from anger to something more careful. He chose you. That's something. He chose obligation. Alara sat down, suddenly exhausted. There's a difference. Beatrice studied her for a long moment, then sat beside her. What happened? Something else happened. I can see it on your face. Alara wanted to lie. She was good at lying, or at least at not telling the whole truth, but the letter was burning in her writing desk upstairs, and the weight of it was becoming unbearable. My marriage was a business arrangement, she said quietly. I knew that, of course, but I didn't know how much of one. My father was bankrupt, Beatrice, completely ruined. Rowan married me to settle his debts and gain access to my mother's coastal holdings. Beatrice's eyes widened. How do you know this? Someone sent me a letter, a former counsel to my father's estate. He laid it all out, the debts, the agreements, everything. Alara looked at her hands. I was collateral, a bargaining chip. Oh, Alara, don't. Alara stood, pacing to the window. Don't pity me. I can't bear it. I'm not pitying you. I'm furious on your behalf. Your father sold you. My father protected our family's reputation. At my expense, yes. But that's what fathers do, isn't it? Protect the family name. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. And Rowan played his part perfectly. The dutiful Duke, marrying the appropriate girl, maintaining the appropriate distance so no one could accuse him of actually caring. What are you going to do? It was the question Alara had been asking herself all night. What was she going to do? Accept it? Ignore it? Pretend the last 8 years hadn't been built on a foundation of lies and financial desperation? I don't know, she admitted. What can I do? If I confront Rowan, I lose what little dignity I have left. If I tell anyone else, I destroy my family's reputation and my own. If you do nothing, you die slowly, Beatrice finished. I've watched you do it for 8 years, Alara. I can't watch anymore. Alara turned from the window. Then don't watch. Go home, Beatrice. Forget we had this conversation. I can't do that. Yes, you can. It's easy. Everyone else does it. Alara heard the edge in her own voice, the anger finally starting to surface. Everyone in that ballroom last night watched Victoria Ashworth humiliate me, and they'll forget about it by next week. Because I'm forgettable. I'm just the Duchess of Thornfield, playing my part, staying in my place. You're not forgettable. You're invisible, and that's not the same thing. Beatrice stood, crossing to take Alara's hands. You've spent so long making yourself invisible that people have stopped seeing you. But I see you, and I'm telling you, you don't have to accept this. What choice do I have? Every choice. You could leave him. You could confront him. You could... Beatrice hesitated, then plunged forward. You could expose the whole damn thing, the contracts, the deals, everything. Burn it all down. Alara stared at her. That would destroy my family. Your family already destroyed you. Maybe it's their turn. The words hung between them, dangerous and thrilling and absolutely terrifying. Alara pulled her hands away. You should go, Beatrice. I need to think. Don't think too long. Sometimes thinking is just another word for giving up. After Beatrice left, Alara stood in the drawing room for a long time, staring at nothing. Her mind was racing, but in circles, always coming back to the same impossible truth. She could not continue living like this, but she didn't know how to stop. Rowan came home late that night, as he always did. Alara heard him moving around in his rooms next door. The creak of floorboards, the low murmur of his valet's voice, the familiar sounds of a separate life being lived inches away from hers. She should sleep. She should turn over and close her eyes and wake up tomorrow, ready to continue the performance. Instead, she got up, pulled on her robe, and knocked on the connecting door between their rooms. The sounds on the other side stopped. Then footsteps, and the door opened. Rowan stood there in shirt sleeves, his jacket discarded, looking tired and human in a way he never looked in public. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Alara? Is something wrong? Everything, she wanted to say. Everything is wrong and has been wrong for 8 years, and I can't do this anymore. Instead, she said, Can we talk? He stepped back, gesturing her inside. His rooms were darker than hers, furnished in heavy woods and deep colors. Masculine. Separate. A world she'd never been invited into. What is it? He poured himself a drink without offering her one. Small gesture, but it stung anyway. Alara stood near the fireplace, gathering her courage. Last night, Victoria. What about her? Did you love her? Rowan's hand stilled on the decanter. Does it matter? Yes, it matters to me. He set down the glass, turning to face her. Why? Why does it matter now after all this time? Because I need to understand what this is. What we are. She held his gaze, refusing to look away. Did you love her? A long silence. Then quietly, yes, I loved her. The confirmation shouldn't have hurt. Alara had known, somewhere deep down, but it did anyway. It carved out a hollow space in her chest where hope had been hiding. And do you love me? This silence was longer, more damning. I respect you, Alara. I honor our marriage vows. That's not what I asked. Rowan's expression hardened. What do you want me to say? That I fell madly in love with a woman I barely knew? That 8 years of a perfectly functional marriage should be thrown away because you suddenly want romance? He took a step closer, his voice dropping. We both knew what this was when we married. Don't pretend otherwise. You're right. I knew. Alara's voice was steady now, cold. I knew my father needed this marriage. I knew you needed the alliance. I even knew you didn't love me. What I didn't know was that I was collateral in a debt settlement. Rowan went very still. What are you talking about? She pulled the letter from her robe pocket and handed it to him, watched his face as he read it, watched the color drain from his cheeks, the jaw muscle jumping with tension. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Is it true? He crumpled the letter in his fist. Your father came to me desperate, ruined. He was going to lose everything, the estate, the title, your mother's coastal holdings. I offered him a way out. By buying me. By marrying you, there's a difference. Is there? Alara laughed, and it sounded broken even to her own ears. You paid off his debts in exchange for access to my mother's trade routes and a respectable wife who wouldn't cause you any trouble. I'd say that's buying, Rowan. I'd say I was purchased like a horse or a piece of furniture. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. For once in 8 years, I'm being completely honest. She took a breath, steadied herself. I was 17 when we married. 17, and so desperate to make my family proud, to fix whatever my father had broken. And you let me believe there was something more to it. You let me hope. I never promised you love. No, you promised me respect, honor, partnership, and you delivered none of it. Alara's voice was rising now, years of swallowed anger finally finding voice. You gave me a title and a house and told me to be grateful. You gave me everything except yourself. What did you expect, Alara? Did you think I would fall in love with you just because we shared a name? Love isn't obligatory. It isn't something you can force. No, but kindness is. Honesty is. You could have given me that much, at least. Rowan threw the crumpled letter into the fire. They both watched it burn, the evidence turning to ash. What do you want from me? He asked finally, his voice tired. An apology? Absolution? I did what I had to do to protect my family's interests and yours. Your father would have lost everything. You would have had nothing. I have nothing now. I have a title and a fortune and a husband who treats me like an obligation. Tell me, Rowan, how is that better than nothing? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret? Guilt? She couldn't tell. I never meant to hurt you. That almost makes it worse. If you'd meant to, at least I could hate you properly. Alara turned toward the door, suddenly exhausted. I need time to think about what I want, about whether I can continue living like this. Alara, she stopped but didn't turn around. What? Don't do anything rash, please. Think about your reputation, your family. Always the reputation, always the family, never her, never what she needed or wanted or deserved. Good night, Rowan. She left before he could respond, closing the door between their rooms with a soft click that sounded like the end of something. Back in her own bed, Alara stared at the ceiling and wondered what came next. She'd confronted him. She'd demanded truth. And all she'd gotten was confirmation of what she'd already known. She was alone. She'd always been alone. The question was whether she was brave enough to do something about it. She didn't sleep. Morning came the way it always did, pale light creeping through heavy curtains, the sounds of the household stirring to life. But Alara felt like she was watching it happen to someone else. Sarah brought tea and toast that went cold on the tray. "Are you feeling well, my lady? You look pale." "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. "Just tired." After Sarah left, Alara sat at her writing desk and stared at the locked drawer. Inside was a copy of the marriage contract. She'd requested it from the family solicitor years ago, thinking she should understand what she'd signed. She'd read it once, been bored by the legal language, and filed it away. Now she pulled it out and read it again, slowly, looking for what she'd missed. And there it was, buried in the fourth clause under Considerations and Agreements, a reference to outstanding obligations of the Ashford estate to be satisfied upon execution of this contract. No amounts listed, no specifics, just that one damning line that turned her marriage into a business settlement. She was reading it for the third time when someone knocked at her door. Not Sarah's gentle tap. This was harder, more insistent. "Come in." Rowan entered without waiting for permission. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his shirt wrinkled, shadows under his eyes. For a moment they just stared at each other across the room, two strangers who shared a name and nothing else. "We need to discuss this," he said. "I thought we did, last night." "Last night you threw accusations at me and left. That's not a discussion." He closed the door behind him, and suddenly the room felt smaller. "Alara, please, can we talk like reasonable people?" "Reasonable." She laughed, and it came out sharp. "You want me to be reasonable about being sold to cover my father's gambling debts?" "It wasn't gambling, it was poor investments. Does that make it better? Does that make me less of a commodity?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "You're twisting this into something it's not. Your father came to me with a problem. I offered a solution that benefited both families. That's how these things work." "These things? You mean arranged marriages? I mean alliances, partnerships. Yes, there were financial considerations, but that doesn't invalidate. It invalidates everything." Alara stood, holding the contract between them like evidence. "You married me to clear a debt and gain access to trade routes. I married you because my father begged me to save our family. Neither of us married for any reason that had to do with actually wanting each other. And that's somehow a revelation to you, after 8 years?" The contempt in his voice stung more than it should have. "The revelation is that you let me believe there was at least respect between us, that we were partners, even if not lovers. But we're not partners, Rowan. We're not even friends. I'm just an asset on your ledger. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my day? My thoughts on anything? When was the last time you looked at me like I was a person instead of an obligation?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched between them, filling with 8 years of everything they'd never said to each other. Finally he spoke. "What do you want me to do, Alara? Apologize for the circumstances of our marriage? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry your father was a fool with money. I'm sorry you were young and naive enough to believe in fairy tales. I'm sorry I'm not the man you apparently thought I'd become." His voice had gone cold now, brittle. "But I won't apologize for doing what was necessary. For both of us. You did what was necessary for you, for your family's interests. I was just the price you paid. And you got a title, a fortune, and a position most women would kill for. Forgive me if I don't feel guilty about that." There it was, the truth under all the politeness and civility. He didn't feel guilty. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong. In his world, people were chess pieces, and he'd simply moved them to the most advantageous positions. Alara set down the contract. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I want a divorce." The words landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Rowan actually took a step back, his composure cracking for the first time. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "Alara, think about what you're saying. A divorce would destroy your reputation, your family's reputation. You'd have nothing." "I already have nothing. At least this way, I'd have my dignity." "Dignity?" He laughed, but it sounded wrong, desperate. "You think leaving me will give you dignity? You'll be a scandal, a cautionary tale. Every door in society will close to you." Maybe those are doors I don't want to walk through anymore. You're not thinking clearly. You're upset about last night, about Victoria, about that damned letter. I'm upset about 8 years of pretending to be happy in a marriage that was purchased like a horse at auction. Her voice had risen, and she didn't care. I'm upset about losing myself trying to be the perfect duchess for a man who doesn't even see me. I'm upset about waking up every morning in this beautiful house, wearing these beautiful clothes, playing this beautiful role, and wanting to scream until my throat bleeds. Rowan stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Where's this coming from? You've never complained before. You've always been perfectly content. I've been perfectly silent. There's a difference. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing to the window. You can't divorce me. Even if you wanted to, even if you were willing to weather the scandal, the marriage contract is ironclad. There are clauses, agreements that go beyond just us. Dissolving it would have legal implications that would expose how much my father owed you, how much you paid for me. Alara smiled, and it felt like broken glass in her mouth. Yes, I've read the contract, all of it, including the parts about what happens if either party seeks dissolution. Rowan turned to face her, and now there was something new in his expression. Fear. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't expose the fact that the Duke of Thornfield bought his wife? That the great Vance family built its latest alliance on the financial ruin of the Ashfords? She took a step toward him. Why not? What do I have to lose, Rowan? My reputation. It's already in tatters after last night. My position? It's a cage. My marriage? It's a lie. You'd destroy your own family to punish me? No, I'd destroy the lie to free myself. They stood there 2 feet apart and miles distant, and Alara saw the moment he realized she meant it, that she was actually capable of burning everything down. What do you want? His voice was quiet now, careful. Tell me what you want, and we can find a solution that doesn't involve, I want out. That's all. I want my life back. You can't have it. Not without destroying both our families in the process. He moved closer, and she saw calculation in his eyes. But we can come to an arrangement, a separation. You keep the title, the financial security. I give you your freedom, just quietly, discreetly. While you what? Find someone else? Go back to Victoria? While we both get what we need without creating a scandal that haunts us for the rest of our lives. It was a reasonable offer, a practical solution, everything Alara had been trained to accept, and she hated it. No, Rowan blinked. No, I'm done with quiet. I'm done with discreet. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not. She moved to her writing desk, pulled out paper and pen. I'm going to petition the council for an annulment based on fraudulent contract terms. I'm going to expose every clause, every agreement, every dirty little detail of how this marriage was arranged. You can't do that. The council will never grant it. Maybe not. But they'll have to hear it, and everyone will know. Your precious reputation, your family's standing, all of it will be examined in public. She started writing, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her. You wanted me silent and obedient. Congratulations, Rowan. You had 8 years of it, but I'm done now. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her writing. Don't do this, please. Think about what you're throwing away. She looked up at him, and for the first time in 8 years she saw him clearly. Saw the fear behind his anger, the desperation behind his control. He needed this marriage. Needed the alliance, the trade agreements, the political advantages it brought. Without her, he lost more than a wife. He lost leverage. Let go of me, Rowan. Alara. Let go. He released her wrist like it burned him, stepped back. If you do this, there's no coming back. You understand that? I can't protect you from the consequences. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to let me go. I can't. The contract is the problem. And I'm going to break it, even if it breaks me in the process. She turned back to her writing, and after a moment she heard him leave. The door closed softly, but it felt like a guillotine dropping. Alara's hands were shaking now. She set down the pen and let herself feel it. The terror, the exhilaration, the absolute certainty that she'd just set something in motion that she couldn't stop. Good. She'd spent 8 years being stoppable, being manageable, being quiet. It was someone else's turn to be afraid. By afternoon, word had spread. Alara didn't know how. Maybe a servant had overheard. Maybe Rowan had told someone in a moment of panic. But by the time Beatrice arrived, breathless and wide-eyed, everyone knew that the Duchess of Thornfield was seeking an annulment. "Are you insane?" Beatrice burst into Alara's sitting room without knocking. "Have you lost your mind completely?" "Probably." Alara was still writing, pages and pages of documentation, pulling out every letter, every record she could find that proved the financial nature of her marriage. "But I'm doing it anyway." "Alara, stop. Just stop and think for 1 second. Beatrice grabbed the papers out of her hands. "Do you understand what this will do? The council won't grant the annulment. They never do for people like us. But they will hold hearings, public hearings. Every dirty detail will be dissected in front of everyone who matters." "I know. Your father will be humiliated, revealed as a bankrupt who sold his daughter." "He did sell his daughter. Why shouldn't people know?" "Because it will destroy him, and your mother and your sister and everyone connected to the Ashford name." Beatrice's voice cracked. "Including you. Especially you." Alara took the papers back gently. "I know what I'm risking, Beatrice. I know I'll probably lose, but I have to try. Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life in that cage, and Her voice broke. I can't do it anymore." Beatrice sat down heavily. "There has to be another way. A separation, maybe. Something that doesn't involve burning down the entire social order. The social order deserves to burn if it requires women to be sold like property. You can't change the world, Alara. You can only survive in it. Maybe one person being brave enough to speak up starts something bigger." Alara knew she sounded naive, idealistic. She didn't care. "Either way, I'm done surviving. I want to live." Before Beatrice could respond, Sarah knocked urgently. "My lady, your mother is here." Alara's stomach dropped. "Here? Now?" "She's in the drawing room. She seems upset." That was an understatement. When Alara entered the drawing room, her mother, Lady Catherine Ashford, was pacing like a trapped animal. The moment she saw Alara, her face twisted with fury. "How dare you? How dare you do this to us?" "Mother, don't mother me. Do you have any idea what you've done? Your father is beside himself. The rumors are already spreading that you're challenging your own marriage, that you're accusing the Duke of—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "Have you gone mad?" "I'm finally sane. For the first time in 8 years." Her mother's hand cracked across her face. The slap echoed in the quiet room. Alara's cheeks stung, but she didn't move, didn't raise a hand to it, just stood there and let her mother see what she'd done. "You ungrateful, selfish girl." Catherine's voice shook. "Do you know what we sacrificed for you? What your father sacrificed? He gave up everything to make sure you had a future, and this is how you repay him?" "He gave up everything to cover his own mistakes. I was just the currency he used. You have no idea what you're talking about. You were 17, sheltered, naive, and you let him sell me anyway." Alara's voice was quiet, but it cut through her mother's tirade like a knife. "You stood there at my wedding and watched me marry a man I barely knew to save father's reputation, and you said nothing, did nothing. Because that's what we do. We sacrifice for family. We do what's necessary, even if what's necessary is wrong." Her mother's eyes were bright with tears now, but her voice stayed hard. "Right and wrong don't matter when you're drowning. Your father was drowning. We all were. Rowan threw us a rope. We took it and tied it around my neck. We saved you, gave you a life of comfort and privilege. You gave me a prison and called it a palace." Alara's cheek still throbbed where her mother had hit her, but she didn't touch it, didn't give Catherine the satisfaction. "And I'm done pretending to be grateful for it. If you go through with this petition, I will never speak to you again. Your father will disown you. You'll have nothing." "Then I'll have nothing, but at least it'll be mine." Her mother stared at her like she was looking at a stranger. Maybe she was. The Alara who'd married Rowan at 17, dutiful, obedient, desperate to please, was gone, burned away over 8 years of slow suffocation. "You're making a terrible mistake," Catherine said finally. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." After her mother left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, Alara sat alone in the drawing room and let herself shake. Beatrice had disappeared at some point during the confrontation, probably too horrified to watch. She was alone, truly alone now. Her husband against her family against her, society waiting to tear her apart. And still, underneath the fear, she felt something like relief. At least she was fighting. At least she was moving forward instead of slowly dying in place. The door opened again. She braced herself for another confrontation, but it was just Sarah holding another letter. "This came for you, my lady. The messenger said it was urgent." Alara broke the seal with trembling fingers. It was from Marcus Aldridge, the lawyer who'd sent her the first letter. "Lady Vance, I heard about your petition to the council. I want you to know that I support your decision, and I'm prepared to testify on your behalf. I have documentation, ledgers, correspondence, contracts that prove the financial arrangements behind your marriage. But I must warn you, the Duke of Thornfield is a powerful man with powerful allies. They will fight this with everything they have. They will attack your character, your family, your reputation. It will be brutal. If you proceed, you need to be prepared for war. I'm ready to stand with you if you are. Marcus Aldridge." Alara read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it with the others. War. That's what this was. She was declaring war on the entire system that had trapped her, and she was probably going to lose. But at least she'd go down fighting. She found Rowan in his study that evening, surrounded by papers and looking haggard. He glanced up when she entered, and something like hope flickered in his eyes. "Have you reconsidered?" "No, I'm filing the petition tomorrow." The hope died. "Alara, please, there has to be a compromise." "There is. Grant me a divorce willingly, let me go quietly, and I won't force a public hearing. You know I can't do that. The contracts, the agreements with your father, if we dissolve the marriage, I have to return the trade concessions. It would cost me millions." "Then I guess you'll have to decide what's more important, your money or your reputation." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "They'll destroy you, the council, society, everyone. They'll make an example of you for daring to challenge the way things work." "I know. And you're willing to risk that? For what? Freedom? You'll be free and alone and ruined." Alara looked back at him. "Better ruined and free than whole and caged." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise the last 8 years were for nothing." She left him there, alone in his study, and went to her own rooms. Tomorrow she would file the petition. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. "Tonight," she wrote, documented everything she could remember about the marriage negotiations, the agreements, the casual way her father had discussed her future like she was an asset to be liquidated. Marcus Aldridge wanted evidence? She'd give him evidence. Somewhere around midnight, Sarah brought her tea and biscuits. "You should rest, my lady." "I can't. There's too much to do." "May I speak plainly?" Alara looked up, surprised. Sarah had been her maid for 6 years and had never asked that before. "Of course. You're doing the right thing." Sarah's eyes were fierce. "My sister was married off to cover debts. She hung herself 3 years later. You're fighting back. That takes courage." The words hit Alara like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on her own situation that she hadn't thought about all the other women trapped in similar circumstances. How many others were suffering silently, dying slowly, too afraid or too beaten down to fight? "Thank you, Sarah." "Whatever you need, my lady, I'm with you." After Sarah left, Alara kept writing, kept building her case. And for the first time since the whole nightmare began, she didn't feel quite so alone. The petition was filed 3 days later. Alara delivered it to the council chambers herself, dressed in her finest gown, head held high. Let them see her. Let them judge her. She was done hiding. The clerk who accepted the documents looked at her with undisguised shock. "You understand what you're requesting, Lady Vance? An annulment based on fraudulent contract terms is an extremely serious accusation." "I understand perfectly. The hearing will be public. Everything will be examined." "I said I understand." He stamped the papers, and just like that, it was done. The wheels were in motion. No turning back now. Alara walked out of the council building into bright afternoon sunlight. People were staring. Word had spread fast. But she didn't care. She'd stopped caring what people thought somewhere between her mother's slap and Rowan's desperate pleas. A carriage pulled up beside her. For a moment she thought it might be Rowan, come to make one last attempt to change her mind. But it was Marcus Aldridge who stepped out. "Lady Vance, I hoped I'd find you here." Mr. Aldridge. She studied him, older than she'd expected, maybe 60, with kind eyes and a serious expression. Thank you for your letters, for your offer to testify. I worked for your father for 15 years. I watched him make every mistake a man can make with money, but I also watched him trade his daughter to cover those mistakes. And he paused, choosing his words carefully. I couldn't live with staying silent anymore. Even though it will cost you, testifying against a duke? I'm old, Lady Vance, past the point where I care about such things. You, on the other hand, you're young. You have your whole life ahead of you, but only if you win this fight. And if I don't, then at least you fought. That's more than most people can say. He handed her a folder. These are copies of all the financial documents I have. The original debts, the settlement agreements, everything. Guard them carefully. Alara took the folder with shaking hands. Why are you helping me? Because someone should have helped you 8 years ago. Better late than never. He tipped his hat and returned to his carriage, leaving Alara standing on the steps with a folder full of ammunition and a heart full of something that might have been hope. She was going to war. And maybe, just maybe, she had a chance of winning. But first, she had to survive the opening battle. The opening battle came faster than she expected. 2 days after filing the petition, Alara received a summons to appear before the council's preliminary hearing. Not in a month, not in weeks, in 3 days. Someone had pulled strings to accelerate the process, and she had a pretty good idea who. They're trying to catch you unprepared, Marcus Aldridge said when she met him at his office. The place was small, tucked into an unfashionable part of the city, lined with legal texts that looked older than he was. Rush the hearing, make you look incompetent, dismiss the petition before it gains traction. Can they do that? They can try. The council has broad discretion in these matters. He pushed his spectacles up his nose, scanning through the documents she'd brought. But they also have to follow procedure, and if we can prove there's merit to your claim, they'll be forced to hold a full public hearing. If. He looked at her over the rims of his glasses. Are you ready for this, Lady Vance? Once you walk into that council chamber, there's no graceful retreat. You'll be questioned, attacked, scrutinized. They'll try to break you. Alara thought about the last 8 years, the suffocation, the loneliness, the slow death of everything she thought she might become. I'm ready. She wasn't, though. Not really. Nothing could have prepared her for walking into the council chambers 3 days later and seeing the faces arrayed against her. The preliminary hearing was supposed to be semi-private, just the council members, the involved parties, and their representatives. But the gallery was packed. Rowan had made sure of that. Every influential family, every political ally, every person who owed him favors, they were all there, watching with the hungry eyes of spectators at an execution. Rowan sat on the opposite side of the chamber with 3 lawyers. 3. Alara had Marcus, a folder of documents, and a stomach that wouldn't stop churning. Lord Chancellor Pembroke presided, an ancient man who'd been on the council since before Alara was born. He looked at her with the kind of distaste usually reserved for something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Lady Vance, you've petitioned for annulment of your marriage to Duke Rowan Vance on the grounds of fraudulent contract terms. This is an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence. He shuffled papers with arthritic fingers. Present your case. Alara stood. Her legs felt like water, but she stood anyway. Lord Chancellor, honorable council members, 8 years ago, I entered into marriage with Duke Vance, believing it to be an alliance of mutual benefit and respect. I have since learned that the marriage was arranged primarily to settle substantial debts owed by my father, Earl Ashford, in exchange for access to my maternal family's coastal trade holdings. That's a serious accusation, one of the council members said. Lord Fairfax, she thought, a friend of Rowan's father. Do you have proof? Marcus stepped forward, handing up the documents. We have the original debt ledgers showing Earl Ashford owed Duke Vance's family over £200,000. We have correspondence between the Duke and the Earl discussing the marriage as a settlement of outstanding obligations. And we have the marriage contract itself, which includes clauses tying the union to specific financial and trade agreements. The council members passed the documents among themselves. Alara watched their faces, trying to read their reactions. Some looked genuinely surprised. Others looked carefully neutral. Pembroke just looked irritated. Lord Ashford's financial troubles are a matter of record, Pembroke said finally. as are many noble families' difficulties in that period. That doesn't make the marriage fraudulent. It does when the bride was not informed of the true nature of the arrangement, Marcus countered. Lady Vance was 17 years old and told she was entering into a conventional marriage alliance. She was not told she was being used as collateral for her father's debts. One of Rowan's lawyers stood, a sharp-faced woman named Adelaide Cross, known for destroying opponents in court. The Duchess was of legal age to consent to marriage. The contract was signed by all parties, including herself. Whether she read it carefully or understood all its implications is hardly the Duke's responsibility. She was a child, Marcus shot back, pressured by her family. She was a legal adult, and if she now regrets a decision she made at 17, that's unfortunate. But it's not grounds for annulment. Adelaide's smile was razor thin. Unless the council is prepared to invalidate every marriage where one party later claims they didn't fully understand what they were agreeing to. In which case, we'll need a much larger chamber. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Alara felt her face burn. Lady Vance, Pembroke's voice cut through the noise. Did you sign the marriage contract willingly? Every eye in the room fixed on her. This was it. The moment that would determine everything. If she said yes, she admitted she'd consented. If she said no, she'd have to prove coercion. I signed it, she said carefully, because my father told me it was my duty to my family, because I was 17 and believed marriage was about partnership and mutual respect, because no one told me I was being traded to cover debts. That's not what I asked. Did anyone force you to sign, threaten you, physically coerce you? No, but then you signed willingly. Next question. Pembroke was already moving on, dismissing her answer like it meant nothing. Do you have evidence that Duke Vance misrepresented himself or the nature of the marriage during your courtship? Courtship. That was generous. They'd had 6 formal meetings before the wedding, all chaperoned, all carefully orchestrated. He never told me about the debts, about the real reason for the marriage. Was he obligated to? Adelaide Cross asked sweetly. Most marriage alliances involve some financial consideration. Dowries, settlements, property transfers. Are we to consider all of those fraudulent as well? This wasn't a dowry. This was a debt payment with me as the currency. Your words, not the contracts. The contract clearly states mutual benefits and considerations, which is standard language. Alara looked at Marcus, desperate. He stood again, his voice steady. The issue isn't whether financial considerations are normal. It's whether they were so substantial as to constitute the primary purpose of the marriage, and whether Lady Vance was deliberately kept ignorant of that purpose. Can you prove deliberate concealment? Pembroke asked. We have letters between Duke Vance and Earl Ashford discussing the need for discretion about the financial arrangements. We have discretion is not the same as deception. Many families prefer to keep financial matters private. Adelaide was on her feet again. Lord Chancellor, this petition is clearly a case of buyer's remorse. The Duchess is unhappy in her marriage, which is regrettable, but unhappiness is not fraud. She knew she was marrying for alliance purposes. She knew there would be financial benefits to both families. The specific amounts and terms are irrelevant. They're not irrelevant to me, Alara said, her voice rising. I had a right to know what I was really agreeing to. You had a right to read the contract you signed, Adelaide countered. Which you did. Sign it, that is. Whether you read it carefully is your own responsibility. The council members were nodding along. Alara could see it slipping away. Her case, her chance, everything. They'd already decided. This hearing was just theater. Lord Chancellor, she said desperately, I'm asking for a full public hearing so that all the evidence can be examined properly. So that, denied. Pembroke's voice was flat. This council has reviewed your petition and finds insufficient grounds to proceed. The marriage contract was legally executed by consenting adults. Whatever your current dissatisfaction with the arrangement, that's a private matter between you and your husband. No. The word came out too loud. No, you can't just dismiss this. The contract is fraudulent. The contract is perfectly legal. This hearing is concluded. I was sold. My father sold me to cover his gambling debts, and you're going to pretend that's legal and acceptable? The room went silent. Even Pembroke looked taken aback by her outburst. Lady Vance, he said coldly, you will compose yourself or be removed from this chamber. Why? Because I'm telling the truth? Because I'm not being quiet and compliant like a good duchess should be? Alara's voice was shaking, but she couldn't stop. 8 years of silence breaking open like a dam. You're all sitting here protecting a system that treats women like property, that allows fathers to trade daughters for money and calls it tradition. And you want me to be quiet about it because it makes you uncomfortable? Remove her, Pembroke said. 2 guards moved toward her. Marcus grabbed her arm. Don't make this worse, please. But it was already worse. It couldn't get any worse. They dismissed her petition without even really hearing it, decided her fate in a room full of Rowan's allies, and called it justice. As the guards reached her, someone stood in the gallery. Victoria Ashworth. I have information relevant to this case, Victoria announced, her voice carrying across the chamber. Pembroke looked like he'd bitten into something rotten. Miss Ashworth, this is not... I was Duke Vance's lover before his marriage. He told me explicitly that he was marrying Lady Vance for financial gain, not love or alliance. He said, and I quote, "It's just business, nothing personal." Victoria's eyes met Alara's across the room. I thought you should know that someone else heard him say what his lawyers are now denying. The chamber erupted. Rowan's lawyers were shouting objections. Council members were calling for order. Guards were trying to remove both Alara and Victoria. And Rowan? Rowan just sat there, his face carved from stone, staring at Victoria with something that looked like betrayal. Order! Pembroke slammed his gavel repeatedly. Miss Ashworth, you will be held in contempt if you continue this disruption. Lady Vance, you are dismissed. This hearing is concluded and the petition is denied. They dragged her out. Actually dragged her, with guards on each arm, through corridors lined with gawking faces. She caught a glimpse of her mother in the crowd, white-faced and furious. Her father wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He couldn't even face what he'd done. They deposited her outside the council building like unwanted baggage. Marcus appeared moments later, looking shell-shocked. That was a disaster, Alara finished. She was shaking all over now, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving her hollow. They dismissed it without even considering the evidence. Pembroke was never going to rule in your favor, too many connections to Rowan's family. Marcus ran a hand through his thinning hair. But Victoria's testimony, that might have changed things if we'd had time to present it properly. It doesn't matter. It's over. They denied the petition. The preliminary petition. We can appeal. Take it to the High Court. No. Alara's voice came out flat, dead. They'll just deny it again. The whole system is designed to protect people like Rowan, people like my father. I was stupid to think I could fight it. You're not stupid. You're brave, and this isn't over. Yes, it is. I lost, Marcus. They won, just like they always do. She walked away before he could argue further, before he could try to give her hope she didn't deserve. The streets were crowded with afternoon traffic, but everyone gave her a wide berth. Word had spread fast. The Duchess of Thornfield making a scene in council chambers, being dragged out by guards, becoming exactly the scandal everyone had predicted. She made it 3 blocks before someone grabbed her arm. She turned, expecting Marcus or maybe another reporter, and found herself face to face with Victoria Ashworth. That was quite a performance, Victoria said. I wasn't performing. I was trying to save my life. By destroying your reputation? Victoria's expression was unreadable. Bold strategy. Why did you do it? Why did you testify for me? Because Rowan's a coward, and someone needed to say it out loud. Victoria released her arm. Also because watching you fight back was the most interesting thing I've seen in years. Most women in your position just suffer quietly until they die. You threw a bomb instead. A bomb that didn't explode. They dismissed my petition, for now. But you planted doubt, made people think. That's more dangerous than you realize. Victoria studied her with something like respect. You really were going to burn it all down, weren't you? Your marriage, your reputation, everything. I still might. I don't have much left to lose. Then let me give you some advice from someone who's already burned a few bridges. Make it count. If you're going to destroy yourself anyway, take them down with you. Victoria walked away before Alara could ask what that meant, disappearing into the crowd like she'd never been there. Alara made it back to Vance's house somehow. The servants wouldn't meet her eyes. Even Sarah looked worried, frightened almost, as she helped Alara out of her ruined dress. It'll be all right, my lady. You'll see. Will it? Alara caught sight of herself in the mirror, wild-eyed, pale, looking exactly like the hysterical woman the council had painted her as. I don't think anything will be all right ever again. After Sarah left, Alara sat at her writing desk and tried to think. The petition was denied. She'd humiliated herself in front of the entire council. Her reputation was in tatters. And she was still trapped in a marriage to a man who'd bought her like livestock. She'd failed. Completely and utterly failed. The connecting door to Rowan's rooms opened. She didn't turn around, just waited for whatever he'd come to say. That was quite a display. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. Did you enjoy yourself, making a spectacle in front of the entire council? About as much as you enjoyed buying a wife to settle debts. I thought we'd moved past that. I thought after the hearing was denied, you'd accept reality and we could… Could what? Go back to pretending? I'm done pretending, Rowan. I told you that. Then what's your plan now? You've destroyed your reputation, alienated the council, made enemies of half the nobility. What exactly did you accomplish? Alara turned to face him. I told the truth. That's what I accomplished. The truth. He laughed, but it sounded wrong, broken. The truth is you were a spoiled girl who thought marriage would be a fairy tale and got disappointed. The truth is you're bitter because I don't love you the way you wanted to be loved. The truth is you'd rather destroy both our lives than accept that not everything works out the way we hoped. The truth is you bought me. And now that I won't stay bought, you're angry. Something flickered across his face, guilt maybe, or shame, but it was gone too quickly to identify. I gave you everything, a title, a home, financial security, everything except a choice. You had a choice. You could have said no. To my father? After he begged me to save the family? I was 17, Rowan. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. And that's my fault? That you were naive? It's your fault that you let me believe there was something more between us than a business transaction. Her voice cracked. You could have been honest. Could have told me the real reason you were marrying me. But you let me hope there might eventually be… She stopped. Couldn't finish. Love? Rowan's voice was cruel now. You wanted me to love you? After you were forced on me as the price of a business deal? After I had to give up the woman I actually wanted to marry, some girl I barely knew because her father couldn't manage money? The words hit like physical blows. Alara had known he didn't love her. Had known for years. But hearing him say it so baldly with such contempt was something else entirely. Get out. This is my house. Then I'll leave. She stood, started pulling dresses out of her wardrobe. I'll go to my father's estate or a hotel or the street. I don't care. I just can't be here anymore. Rowan crossed the room, grabbed her wrist to stop her packing. You're not going anywhere. You're my wife. I'm your property. You made that very clear today. But property can be abandoned, Rowan. And I'm done being owned by you. If you leave this house, I'll cut you off. No money, no support, nothing. You'll be destitute. Then I'll be destitute and free. They stared at each other, and for a moment Alara thought she saw something crack in his expression. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. Please, he said quietly, don't do this. We can find a way to… To what? To go back to how things were? I can't, Rowan. I can't live in that cage anymore. I'd rather starve in the street. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. He released her wrist, stepped back. Fine. Leave. See how long you last without the protection of my name, without money or connections or any of the things you've taken for granted for 8 years. I'll manage. You won't. You'll come crawling back within a week, begging me to take you in, and I won't. His face had gone cold again. All traces of vulnerability vanished. You want to destroy our marriage? Fine, it's destroyed, but don't expect me to pick up the pieces when you realize what you've thrown away. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Alara stood there, surrounded by half-packed bags, and tried to feel something other than numb terror. She'd just lost everything. Her petition denied, her reputation ruined, her husband… No, not her husband anymore. Whatever they'd been to each other, that was over now. She finished packing, moving like a woman in a dream. 3 bags of clothes and personal items. That's what 8 years of marriage amounted to. 3 bags. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face stricken. My lady, please, where will you go? I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Let me come with you, please. I can help. You'll lose your position. Rowan will never give you a reference. I don't care. You shouldn't be alone right now. The kindness nearly broke her. Alara hugged her maid, her friend, and felt tears sting her eyes for the first time since the hearing. Thank you, but no. I won't let you sacrifice your livelihood for me. She left before Sarah could argue further, walking out of Vance's house with her 3 bags and no idea where she was going. The evening was cold, the kind of damp chill that sank into your bones. She made it to the corner before she had to stop and rest, the bags heavier than she'd expected. A carriage pulled up beside her. For a wild moment she thought it might be Rowan, come to drag her back. But it was Marcus Aldridge who stepped out. I thought you might need somewhere to stay, he said gently. My sister runs a boarding house, respectable, quiet. She'll ask no questions. Alara wanted to refuse, wanted to prove she could do this on her own, but her arms were shaking from the weight of the bags and she had exactly 4 pounds in her purse. All right, thank you. He helped her into the carriage. As they pulled away from Vance's house, Alara looked back once at the grand facade, the lit windows, the life she was leaving behind. She'd failed to get her annulment, failed to expose the truth in any meaningful way, failed at everything she'd set out to do. But she was out. She'd escaped the cage. Whether that was victory or just a different kind of defeat, she'd have to figure out later. The boarding house was exactly what Marcus had promised. Respectable, quiet, and willing to ask no questions if the money was good. His sister, a stern-faced woman named Margaret, showed Alara to a small room on the 3rd floor with a single bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. Rent is due weekly, Margaret said. No visitors after 10, no loud noises, no scandalous behavior. Alara almost laughed. Her entire life had become a scandal. What was one more violation of propriety? After Margaret left, she sat on the bed and tried to inventory what she had left. 4 pounds. 3 bags of clothes, most of them too fine for a boarding house, a destroyed reputation, and a burning need to make Rowan pay for what he'd done, even though she had no idea how. Someone knocked. She opened the door to find Marcus standing there with a basket. My sister's Stu. She's a terrible cook, but she means well. He hesitated. May I come in? Just for a moment. The room was barely big enough for the bed, but Alara stepped back and let him enter. He set down the basket and turned to face her. The petition may have been denied, but this isn't over. We can appeal. I don't have money for an appeal. I don't have money for next week's rent. I'll cover it. No, you've done enough. More than enough. Alara sat on the bed because there was nowhere else to sit. I failed, Marcus. I thought I could fight the system, and I was wrong. They're too powerful, too connected. You didn't fail. You scared them. That's why Pembroke rushed the hearing and denied the petition so quickly. You made them nervous. Nervous isn't the same as defeated. No, but it's a start. He pulled a newspaper from his coat pocket. This came out this afternoon, after the hearing. Alara unfolded it and felt her stomach drop. The headline screamed across the front page, Duchess challenges marriage in explosive hearing, claims she was sold to Duke to cover father's debts. The article detailed everything. Her petition, the evidence, Victoria's testimony, her removal from the chambers. It painted her as either a brave crusader against corrupt marriage practices or a hysterical woman making wild accusations, depending on which paragraph you read. But either way, the story was out, public, spreading. They can't suppress this, Marcus said quietly. The council denied your petition, but they can't deny the questions you've raised. People are talking, wondering how many other marriages were arranged this way, how many other women were sold like you were. That doesn't help me. Maybe not, but it might help someone else. And sometimes that's all we can do, make things a little less terrible for whoever comes after us. He left her with the newspaper and the stew and a parting assurance that he'd check on her tomorrow. Alara ate the stew, which was indeed terrible, and read the article 3 more times, trying to decide if she'd accomplished anything or just made herself a cautionary tale. She fell asleep still wondering. The knock came at dawn, loud, insistent, rattling the thin door in its frame. Alara jerked awake, disoriented. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. This wasn't her room at Vance's house. This wasn't... The knock came again. Open up! Duke's business! Her blood went cold. She crossed to the door on shaking legs. What do you want? Open the door, Lady Vance, or we'll break it down. She opened it. Two men in the Duke's livery stood there, faces hard and unsympathetic. Behind them, Margaret hovered with a terrified expression. You need to come with us, one of them said. Duke's orders. I'm not going anywhere. I don't live there anymore. You're still the Duchess, legally, and the Duke has the right to... I know my rights, and I'm not going. The man sighed like this was all very tedious. We can do this easy or hard, my lady. Your choice. Margaret made a small sound of distress. The other boarders were peering out of their rooms now, watching the drama unfold. Alara's mind raced. She could scream, fight, make a scene. But what would that accomplish? They'd just drag her out anyway, and she'd lose what little dignity she had left. Fine. Let me get dressed. They waited while she changed into a traveling dress with shaking hands. This was it. Rowan was asserting his legal rights as her husband, forcing her back under his control. And there was nothing she could do about it. As the guards escorted her down the stairs, past the horrified boarders and apologetic Margaret, Alara felt the last of her hope die. She'd tried to escape, tried to fight, and the system had crushed her anyway, just like it always did. The carriage was waiting outside. One of the guards opened the door and Alara climbed in with the resigned air of a prisoner heading to execution. But it wasn't Rowan inside, it was her father. Earl Vincent Ashford looked older than she remembered, gray and haggard, and somehow smaller. He didn't meet her eyes as the carriage lurched into motion. Father, she said carefully, what's going on? Rowan asked me to talk to you, to make you see reason. Reason? Is that what we're calling it now? Alara, please. You've made your point. You've created your scandal. Now it's time to come home and what? Pretend everything's fine? Go back to being the quiet, obedient Duchess? Go back to being safe. He finally looked at her, and there was fear in his eyes. Real fear. Rowan he's angry, Alara. Angrier than I've ever seen him. If you don't come back voluntarily, he'll force the issue. And when he does what? What can he do to me that he hasn't already done? Her father's hands twisted together in his lap. He can have you declared mentally incompetent, commit you to an institution. Legally, as your husband, he has that right. The world tilted sideways. He wouldn't. He would. He's already consulted with doctors, built a case that your behavior, the petition, the outbursts, leaving his house, demonstrates mental instability requiring professional care. Her father's voice cracked. Come back, Alara. Please. Before he makes this even worse. Alara stared at him. This man who'd sold her 8 years ago and was now begging her to go back to her buyer. This man who'd rather see her locked away than free. No, she said. Alara. Take me back to the boarding house. Now. I can't. Rowan is expecting... I don't care what Rowan expects. I'm not going back to that house. And if he tries to have me committed, I'll fight him. I'll make such a scene that every newspaper in the city will cover it. I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of man he is, what kind of man you are. Her father looked at her with something like despair. You can't win this. He has too much power, too many connections. He'll destroy you. Then let him try. At least I'll go down fighting instead of quietly suffocating in a gilded cage. The carriage stopped. They were back at the boarding house, guards waiting outside. Last chance, her father said quietly. Come back with me now, and Rowan will drop the commitment proceedings. He'll give you another chance to what? To be a good little wife? To accept my place? Alara reached for the door handle. Tell Rowan he can try to have me committed. Tell him I'll fight him every step of the way. Tell him... The door opened from outside. But it wasn't a guard. It was Beatrice. And behind her a crowd of women Alara recognized from society events, all dressed in mourning black and holding signs. You're not going anywhere, Beatrice said firmly, and neither is anyone else unless they want to explain to these 30 witnesses why they're kidnapping the Duchess of Thornfield against her will. Her father's face went pale. What is this? This is what happens when you try to silence a woman who's finally found her voice. Get out of the carriage, Alara. Now. Alara stumbled out into a wall of support she hadn't expected. Women she barely knew formed a protective circle around her. Behind them, newspaper men with cameras were capturing everything. Lady Vance, one of them shouted. Is it true the Duke is trying to have you committed? How do you know that? her father demanded, climbing out of the carriage. Beatrice smiled grimly. One of his doctors has a conscience, and a daughter. He told his wife what Rowan was planning, and she told me. The newspapermen were scribbling furiously. Cameras flashed. Alara's father stood there looking trapped, realizing too late that this attempted kidnapping was now documented, public, scandalous. Go back to Rowan, Beatrice told him. Tell him his plan failed. Tell him that if he tries again, we'll make sure every person in this city knows he tried to have his wife locked away for daring to tell the truth. The carriage pulled away with her father still inside, and Alara found herself surrounded by women she'd only ever made polite conversation with at parties. They were holding signs that read, "Women are not property," and "Justice for the Duchess," and one that simply said, "We believe her." "What is this?" Alara asked, her voice shaking. "This is what you started," Beatrice said, "when you stood up in that council chamber and told the truth. These women, we all have stories like yours. Maybe not exactly the same, but close enough. And we're done being silent about it." One of the women stepped forward, Lady Helena Pierce, Alara remembered, married to a viscount twice her age. "My father traded me to settle a lawsuit," Helena said quietly. "I was 16. I thought it was normal. I thought that's just what marriage was." Another woman spoke up. "My husband bought me to gain access to my family's shipping business. I didn't find out until after the wedding. Mine married me because his mother insisted on an heir. I was the most convenient option." Story after story, each one a variation on the same theme. Women traded, bought, used as currency in transactions that benefited everyone except them. And they were all here, standing together, making their private shames public. "We can't win," Alara said. "The system is too powerful." "Maybe," Beatrice agreed, "but we can make it harder for them to keep doing this. We can make noise, create pressure, force people to see what's been hidden for so long." She took Alara's hand. "You started this. Don't give up now." The newspaper headline the next morning read, "30 Women Stand with Duchess Against Duke's Commitment Attempt. Questions mount about marriage practices among nobility." Alara read it in her tiny room at the boarding house, surrounded by the remnants of her old life and the uncertain promise of something new. She'd lost the petition, lost her marriage, lost almost everything. But she'd started something she couldn't stop even if she wanted to. And Rowan, powerful as he was about to discover that silencing one woman was hard enough. Silencing 30 was going to be impossible. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which gave Alara just enough time to watch her entire world crumble. First came the whispers, then the cut direct. Women she'd known for years crossing the street to avoid her. Invitations suddenly drying up. Servants gossiping in corners they thought she couldn't hear. By the end of the first week, even the tradespeople had started treating her differently. The florist claimed to be out of her favorite roses. The dressmaker's assistant said they were too busy to take new orders. Alara was being erased from polite society, one small humiliation at a time. "You need to eat something." Beatrice pushed a plate across the breakfast table, her face pinched with worry. She'd been staying at Vance's house since the petition was filed, claiming she wouldn't abandon Alara to face this alone. Rowan had moved to his club. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't been hungry in days. You're going to collapse before you ever make it to the council chambers." Alara picked up a piece of toast just to make Beatrice stop hovering. It tasted like sawdust. Everything tasted like sawdust lately. Sarah entered with the Morning Post, her expression carefully blank. "More letters, my lady." The pile had been growing every day. Most were anonymous, vicious little notes calling her ungrateful, hysterical, ashamed to her sex. A few were supportive, usually from women who signed with initials instead of names, too afraid to be identified. Those letters Alara kept in a box by her bed. On the worst nights, she read them over and over, reminding herself she wasn't completely alone. Today's pile contained something different, a formal summons on heavy cream paper, sealed with the council's insignia. Beatrice leaned over to read it. "They've moved up the hearing to next week." "That's not enough time. Marcus said we needed at least a month to prepare. They're trying to catch you off guard, make you stumble." Beatrice grabbed the summons, read it again like the words might change. "We need to get word to Aldridge immediately." But when Sarah went to fetch him, she returned alone, her face pale. "Mr. Aldridge's offices are closed, my lady. His clerk said he's left the city on urgent business." The toast turned to dust in Alara's mouth. What? The clerk didn't know when he'd return, only that he left suddenly 2 days ago. Beatrice met Alara's eyes across the table. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that Marcus Aldridge had abandoned her, that he'd gotten cold feet, realized what testifying against a duke would cost him, and fled. Or worse, that Rowan had gotten to him somehow, bought him off or threatened him, or simply made it clear that standing with Alara meant destroying his own future. We can still proceed without him, Beatrice said, but her voice lacked conviction. You have the documents he gave you. The evidence is still solid. Evidence means nothing if there's no one credible to present it. I'm the scorned wife making wild accusations. He was supposed to be the neutral third party, the professional who could verify the truth. Alara set down the half-eaten toast, her appetite completely gone. Without him, it's just my word against Rowan's. And whose word carries more weight, a duke's or the hysterical woman trying to escape her marriage? You're not hysterical. Try telling the council that. The next few days blurred together in a haze of preparation and panic. Alara read through Marcus's documents until she could recite them from memory, practiced her testimony until the words felt smooth and cold as river stones, tried not to think about the fact that she was walking into battle without her most crucial weapon. Beatrice helped where she could, but even she was starting to show cracks. My mother sent a letter, she admitted one evening over dinner neither of them was eating. She wants me to come home, says I'm damaging my own prospects by associating with you. Then go. Alara meant it. I won't think less of you. I'm not going anywhere. I wanted you to know what it's costing, to stand with you. The guilt was immediate and sharp. Alara had been so focused on her own suffering that she hadn't fully considered how this was affecting Beatrice, how it was affecting Sarah, who'd lost friends among the other servants for defending her mistress, how it was affecting everyone who'd chosen her side in this invisible war. I'm sorry. I never meant... Stop apologizing. I chose this. We all did. Beatrice reached across the table, squeezed Alara's hand. Just win, all right? Make it worth something. The night before the hearing, Alara couldn't sleep. She paced her rooms, read through her notes one more time, tried to calm the panic clawing at her throat. At some point past midnight, she heard a knock at her door. It was Sarah, holding a candle, her hair in a nighttime braid. There's someone here to see you, my lady. Says it's urgent. At this hour? Who? He wouldn't give his name, but he said to tell you he has information about the Ashford debts. Alara's heart kicked against her ribs. She threw on a robe and followed Sarah downstairs to the small receiving room they used for tradespeople. A man waited there, thin and nervous-looking, clutching a leather satchel to his chest like it might escape. He couldn't have been more than 30, with ink-stained fingers and the haunted look of someone who'd made a dangerous decision and was already regretting it. Lady Vance, he bowed awkwardly. I apologize for the late hour. I'm Thomas Ridley. I worked as a clerk in Duke Vance's household 6 years ago. What do you want, Mr. Ridley? To give you this. He thrust the satchel at her like it was on fire. I was there when the marriage contracts were negotiated. I transcribed some of the correspondence between your father and the Duke. I kept copies. I shouldn't have, I know, but He swallowed hard. I thought someone should have a record of what actually happened. Alara took the satchel with trembling hands. Why are you giving this to me now? Because I have a daughter. She's 4. And when I think about someone trading her like property someday, His voice cracked. I can't stay silent. Not anymore. This could ruin you. If Rowan finds out, he already knows. I sent him a letter yesterday, told him I was coming to you. Thomas smiled, but it was bitter. I'm unemployed as of this morning. Probably unemployable after tonight, but at least I'll be able to look my daughter in the eye. After he left, refusing payment, refusing protection, just disappearing into the dark like a ghost, Alara opened the satchel. Inside were dozens of letters, all in her father's handwriting or Rowan's. Desperate pleas for help, cold calculations of assets and debts, negotiations over her future conducted like she was a horse being sold. One letter made her hand shake so badly she had to set it down. My dear Vance, I accept your generous offer regarding my daughter Alara. As discussed, the marriage will settle my outstanding debts and grant you access to the coastal trade agreements held in my wife's name. I trust Alara will prove a suitable wife. She's been raised to be obedient and has a pleasant enough disposition. More importantly, she's unaware of the true nature of our arrangement and will remain so. I recommend we proceed with the engagement announcement as soon as possible. The sooner this matter is settled, the sooner I can breathe easily again. Your grateful friend Vincent Ashford Alara read it 3 times, each word carving itself deeper into her chest, unaware of the true nature. Her father had explicitly planned to keep her in the dark, had counted on her obedience, her pleasant disposition, her ignorance. She should have felt angry. Instead, she just felt tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. But she took the letters upstairs and added them to her evidence pile. Because Thomas Ridley had sacrificed his livelihood to give her the truth, the least she could do was use it. The council chambers were smaller than Alara expected. She'd imagined something grand and imposing, marble columns, vaulted ceilings, the weight of history pressing down. Instead, it was just a paneled room with a long table where 7 council members sat like judges, their faces carefully neutral. Rowan sat on one side with his solicitor, a silver-haired man named Pemberton, who looked like he could argue stone into water. Alara sat on the other side with Beatrice and a young lawyer named James Whitmore, who'd agreed to represent her despite the professional suicide it represented. The gallery behind them was packed, every seat filled with nobles and their wives, journalists with notebooks, curious onlookers hungry for scandal. Alara felt their eyes on her back like physical weight. Lord Chancellor Hartwick, the head of the council, cleared his throat. We're here to consider Lady Alara Vance's petition for annulment of her marriage to Duke Rowan Vance on the grounds of fraudulent contract terms. Lady Vance, you may present your case. Alara stood. Her legs felt like water, but she forced herself to stay upright. James had wanted to speak for her, but she'd refused. This was her fight, her truth. She needed to speak it herself. 8 years ago, I married Duke Vance believing it was a strategic alliance between our families. What I didn't know, what I wasn't told, was that my father was bankrupt and had negotiated my marriage as a debt settlement. Her voice was steady. That was something. I was 17. I trusted my father to act in my best interests. Instead, I was used as collateral. Pemberton rose smoothly. My Lord Chancellor, this is hardly irregular. Many marriages among our class involve financial considerations. Lady Vance's naive disappointment does not constitute fraud. It constitutes fraud when the bride is deliberately kept ignorant of the terms. Alara pulled out the first letter, the one from Marcus Aldridge detailing her father's debts. I have documentation, obtained illegally, I presume. Pemberton's smile was thin. Through what means did you acquire private financial records, Lady Vance? Through someone with a conscience, someone who thought I deserved to know the truth, someone who violated confidentiality agreements, and possibly the law. This council cannot accept such evidence. Lord Chancellor Hartwick frowned. Is the evidence authenticated? Alara's lawyer stood. We're prepared to call witnesses who can verify. Mr. Marcus Aldridge, perhaps? Pemberton cut in. I'm afraid he's unavailable. Left the country quite suddenly. Very suspicious timing, wouldn't you say? The murmur through the gallery was like wasps stirring. Alara felt the momentum slipping, felt the trap closing. Without Marcus, without credible witnesses, her evidence looked exactly like what Pemberton was implying, illegally obtained documents from questionable sources. I have other evidence. She pulled out Thomas Ridley's letters with shaking hands. Correspondence between my father and Duke Vance that proves they deliberately kept me ignorant of the financial arrangements. Rowan's face had gone white. He leaned over to whisper something urgent to Pemberton, but his lawyer waved him off. More stolen documents? Pemberton sounded almost bored. My Lord Chancellor, how long must we entertain this charade? Lady Vance is a discontented wife making desperate accusations. The Duke has been nothing but generous and patient with her unstable behavior. Unstable? Alara's voice cut through the room like glass breaking. I'm unstable because I object to being purchased? Because I demand to know the truth about my own life? You're unstable because you're willing to destroy your family's reputation, your husband's standing, and your own future based on a conspiracy theory cobbled together from questionable documents. Pemberton's voice was smooth as silk, deadly as poison. Tell me, Lady Vance, have you consulted a physician about these episodes? Your husband mentioned you've been under considerable strain. Don't. The word came from Rowan. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud in the sudden silence. Don't do that. Pemberton blinked. Your Grace? Don't paint her as hysterical. Don't make her sound insane for wanting the truth. Rowan's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. Everything she's saying, the debts, the arrangements, the deliberate deception, it's all true. The room erupted, voices overlapping, council members leaning forward, journalists scribbling frantically. Pemberton grabbed Rowan's arm, hissing something urgent, but Rowan shook him off. It's true, he said again, louder this time. Her father came to me desperate. I offered to settle his debts in exchange for marriage to Alara and access to the Ashford Coastal Holdings. We agreed to keep the financial details private. I knew she was young. I knew she trusted her father. He stopped, something cracking in his voice. I used that trust, and I've regretted it for 8 years. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't supposed to happen. Rowan was supposed to fight her, deny everything, force her to prove every accusation. He wasn't supposed to just confess. Lord Chancellor Hartwick banged his gavel, calling for order. Duke Vance, do you understand what you're admitting? You're confirming that the marriage contract was executed under false pretenses. I'm confirming that I married a 17-year-old girl who deserved honesty and gave her lies instead. I'm confirming that I built 8 years of marriage on a foundation of deception. Rowan looked at Alara for the first time since the hearing began. I'm confirming that she deserves better than what I gave her. Pemberton had gone red. Your Grace, I must strongly advise. I'm done with advice. I'm done with protecting myself at her expense. Rowan turned back to the council. Grant her the annulment. Dissolve the contracts. Return the trade agreements to the Ashford family. I'll take the financial loss. This is madness, Pemberton sputtered. You'll lose millions. I've already lost what mattered. Rowan's voice was quiet now. I lost it 8 years ago when I chose money over honor. I'm not making that mistake again. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Everyone staring at the Duke of Thornfield, who'd just committed professional suicide to tell the truth. Alara found her voice. Why? He looked at her, and she saw exhaustion in his face, regret, something that might have been grief. Because you were right about all of it, and because watching you fight alone while I hid behind technicalities and lawyers, he shook his head. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be that person anymore. Lord Chancellor Hartwick cleared his throat. This is highly irregular. The council will need time to deliberate. There's nothing to deliberate. An older woman stood in the gallery, her voice carrying authority. Lady Margaret Thornfield, Rowan's aunt. My nephew has confessed to fraudulent contract terms. The evidence is documented. Grant the annulment and be done with it. Another voice joined hers, then another. Council members who'd been silent suddenly finding opinions, nobles in the gallery taking sides. The tide was turning. Alara could feel it. Not entirely in her favor, maybe, but at least acknowledging she had a point. That she deserved to be heard. That she wasn't just hysterical or ungrateful or any of the other things they'd called her. Lord Chancellor Hartwick banged his gavel again. The council will recess to discuss this matter. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning with a decision. The chamber emptied slowly, people clustering in groups to whisper and speculate. Alara stood frozen in place, unable to process what had just happened. Rowan approached her carefully, like she might bolt. Alara, why did you do that? Her voice came out hoarse. You just destroyed yourself, your finances, your reputation, everything. Maybe I was tired of the person I'd become. The person who could look at you across the breakfast table every morning and feel nothing but guilt. He smiled, but it was sad. You asked me once if I loved you. I said no. That was the truth. But it was also a failure. On my part, not yours. I don't understand. I know. I don't expect you to. He glanced around the emptying chamber. For what it's worth, you were magnificent up there, brave and honest, and everything I wasn't 8 years ago. Before she could respond, he walked away, leaving her standing there with Beatrice and James Whitmore and the smoking ruins of what had been her marriage. Did that really just happen? Beatrice whispered. I think so. Alara sat down heavily. I think he just won my case for me. He destroyed his own case, admitted everything. James was shuffling papers, looking dazed. I've never seen anything like it. A defendant confessing during the hearing, corroborating the plaintiff's claims. He did the right thing. Beatrice squeezed Alara's shoulder. Finally. That night, Alara couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't from panic. It was from something she couldn't quite name, a strange mix of victory and loss, freedom and grief. She'd won, or was about to win anyway. The council would grant the annulment tomorrow. She could feel it, but the victory felt hollow somehow, like she'd climbed a mountain only to find the view wasn't what she'd expected. A knock at her door made her jump. She opened it to find Sarah, holding another letter. "This just arrived, my lady, by special courier." Alara broke the seal. It was from Marcus Aldridge. "Lady Vance, by the time you read this, the hearing will be over. I apologize for my absence. I was called away on urgent family matters, not cowardice or bribery as you may have suspected. But more importantly, I wanted you to know. I wasn't the only one keeping records. Thomas Ridley contacted me months ago with his concerns. I helped him compile his evidence, and there are others, clerks, servants, witnesses who were there when the contracts were negotiated. They're ready to testify if needed. You were never as alone in this fight as you thought you were. The truth has a way of finding allies. So do the brave. With respect, Marcus Aldridge." Alara read the letter twice, then pressed it to her chest. Not alone. She'd never been alone. She'd just been too deep in her own fear to see the people standing with her. The next morning, she returned to the council chambers with her head high. The gallery was even more crowded than before. Word had spread about Rowan's confession, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. Lord Chancellor Hartwick didn't waste time. "The council has reached a decision. In light of Duke Vance's admission and the documented evidence of fraudulent contract terms, we grant Lady Alara Vance's petition for annulment. The marriage is dissolved, effective immediately." The relief hit like a wave. Alara gripped the table to stay upright. "Furthermore," Hartwick continued, "we're ordering a review of marriage contract practices among the peerage. Recent events have highlighted troubling patterns of deception and coercion. Changes will be made." That sent another wave of whispers through the gallery. Alara had wanted her freedom. She hadn't expected to start a revolution. After the formal proceedings ended, people actually approached her, not to condemn, but to quietly offer support. Lady Margaret clasped her hand. "You did well, child. Thornfield men need someone to knock sense into them occasionally." Even some of the journalists were respectful. "Lady Vance, would you be willing to speak about your experience? Other women might benefit from hearing." "Maybe." Alara was exhausted, overwhelmed, barely standing. "Not today. But maybe." Outside the chambers, Rowan waited by his carriage. He looked diminished somehow, despite his expensive clothes and proud bearing, like he'd lost something vital. "Alara." She stopped, met his eyes. "Rowan, I meant what I said yesterday. You deserved better. I hope you find it." "I hope you do too." They looked at each other for a long moment, two people who'd shared a name and a house and 8 years of silence. Then Rowan climbed into his carriage and drove away, and Alara watched him go without regret. Beatrice appeared at her elbow. "You're free." "I'm free," Alara repeated, testing the words. They felt strange, new. "What do I do now?" "Whatever you want. That's the point of freedom." What she wanted, Alara realized, was to help, to make sure other women didn't end up trapped the way she'd been, to use her story, her pain, her hard-won victory for something bigger than herself. But first, she wanted to sleep, for days, in a bed that was entirely hers, in a house with no ghosts, in a life she'd chosen. She climbed into her own carriage, not the Vance carriage, but one she'd hired herself, and felt the weight begin to lift from her shoulders. The battle was over. She'd won. Now came the harder part, figuring out who Alara Ashford was when she wasn't being the Duchess of Thornfield. But she had time. She had freedom. She had allies she hadn't known existed. And for the first time in 8 years, she had hope. The first week of freedom felt like learning to walk again after years in chains. Every morning, Alara woke up in the small townhouse she'd rented with her settlement money, modest compared to Vance's house, but entirely hers, and had to remind herself that she didn't owe anyone her time, her presence, her obedience. It should have been liberating. Instead, it was terrifying. "You're allowed to just sit there, you know." Beatrice looked up from her embroidery, eyebrow raised. "You don't have to be productive every second of the day." Alara had been pacing the sitting room for the better part of an hour, unable to settle. I don't know what to do with myself. For 8 years I had a schedule, events to attend, charities to support, appearances to maintain. Now I have nothing. You have everything. You just don't know what you want yet. That was the problem, wasn't it? Alara had spent so long being what other people needed that she'd forgotten how to want anything for herself. Sarah brought tea and a stack of letters, requests for interviews, invitations from women's groups, even a few marriage proposals from men who apparently found her notoriety attractive. Alara set them all aside except one, a simple note on plain paper. Lady Ashford, I read about your case in the papers. I'm in a similar situation, married to settle my family's debts, kept in the dark about the arrangements. I don't know if I have the courage to do what you did, but I wanted you to know you've given me hope. A friend. No signature, no return address, just those few words that cracked something open in Alara's chest. She wasn't the only one. Of course she wasn't the only one. How many other women were trapped in marriages built on lies? How many were suffering in silence, too afraid or too beaten down to fight back? I need to do something, she said suddenly. Beatrice set down her embroidery. Like what? I don't know yet. But this can't be for nothing. The hearing, the scandal, all of it has to mean something. Over the next few days, more letters arrived. Women thanking her, women asking for advice, women sharing their own stories of marriages arranged for money, of being treated like property, of slowly dying in gilded cages. Alara read every single one, and with each letter, the seed of an idea grew stronger. She was writing a response to a particularly heartbreaking letter, a woman married at 16 to a man 40 years her senior, when someone knocked at her door. Sarah showed in a visitor Alara hadn't expected, Lady Margaret Thornfield. Lady Margaret, Alara rose, uncertain. This is unexpected. I imagine it is. Margaret settled into a chair without being asked, the privilege of age and rank. I'll be direct. I want to fund you. Fund me? For what? Whatever you're planning. And don't pretend you're not planning something. I saw your face at the hearing when Hartwick mentioned reviewing marriage practices. You looked like a woman who'd found her purpose. Alara sat down slowly. I'm not planning anything yet, just reading letters, thinking. Then think with resources. Money, connections, whatever you need. Margaret's expression was fierce. I've watched the Thornfield men ruin good women for 3 generations. My own marriage was arranged for political advantage. I was 17, and I spent 40 years with a man who barely knew my name. I won't watch it happen again if I can help it. Why me? Why not do this yourself? Because I'm old and tired and people see me as harmless. You're young and angry, and you just took down one of the most powerful dukes in the country. People listen to scandal. Use it. Alara thought about the letters, about all the women writing to her, looking for hope or guidance or just someone who understood. What if I fail? Then you fail trying. Better than dying slowly without trying at all. After Margaret left, pressing a bank draft into Alara's hands that made her eyes water at the amount, Beatrice looked at her expectantly. Well? Well, what? Are you going to do it? Start something? Actually try to change things? Alara looked at the stack of letters, at the bank draft, at her own hands that had stopped shaking somewhere along the way. I think I have to, don't I? You don't have to do anything. That's the whole point of what you fought for. Beatrice smiled. But yes, I think you should. The planning started small. Alara met with lawyers who specialized in contract law, with women's advocates who'd been fighting these battles for years, with journalists who wanted to write about marriage reform but needed credible sources. She learned about legal loopholes, about property rights, about all the ways the system was designed to trap women and keep them trapped. And slowly, piece by piece, she started building something. It began as a weekly gathering in her sitting room, 6 women who'd reached out after the hearing, who wanted to share their stories or seek advice. Alara served tea and listened. Sometimes that was all they needed. Sometimes they wanted more. Can you help me understand my marriage contract? One woman asked. My husband says I signed away my inheritance rights, but I don't remember that being explained. Alara looked at the contract, found the clause buried in legal language, and watched the woman's face crumble as she realized she'd been deceived. There might be a way to challenge this, Alara said carefully, if you can prove you weren't fully informed of the terms, like you did. Like I tried to do. It's not guaranteed, it's not even likely, but it's possible. The woman left with James Whitmore's card and something like hope in her eyes, and Alara felt that seed of purpose growing stronger. Within a month, the weekly gathering had outgrown her sitting room. They rented a small hall near the university district, away from the fashionable neighborhoods where they might be recognized. Women came in disguise sometimes, heavy veils, borrowed clothes, servants' entrances. The shame of seeking help was still profound, but they came. Alara found herself leading discussions she'd never imagined having, about property rights and financial independence, about how to recognize deception in contract negotiations, about resources for women who wanted to leave but had nowhere to go. "This is dangerous, you know." Thomas Ridley appeared at one of the meetings, looking nervous but determined. "If the wrong people find out what you're doing here, let them find out. I'm done hiding. I'm not talking about social consequences. I'm talking about legal ones. You're helping women challenge binding contracts. Some of these husbands have a lot to lose." Alara knew he was right. She'd already received threatening letters, had noticed men watching her house at odd hours, but she'd also received letters from women who'd successfully renegotiated their marriage terms, who'd escaped abusive situations, who'd found the courage to speak up because she had. "I'll be careful," she promised, "but I won't stop." 3 months after the annulment, Alara was invited to speak at the Women's Rights Assembly, a gathering of advocates and reformers who'd been pushing for legal changes for decades. She almost declined. Public speaking terrified her, and she still felt like a fraud half the time. But Beatrice talked her into it. "You have a story people need to hear. Tell it." The assembly hall was packed, hundreds of faces staring up at the stage where Alara stood, her notes trembling in her hands. She'd written a careful speech, full of statistics and legal arguments. She set it aside. "I was 17 when I got married," she began. "I wore a beautiful dress and said beautiful words and believed I was starting a beautiful life. What I was actually starting was 8 years in a cage I didn't even know I was in." The room was silent. She kept going. "My father sold me to cover his debts. My husband bought access to my family's assets. I was the transaction that made both of them whole. And for 8 years, I played the role I'd been assigned. The grateful wife, the dutiful duchess, the woman who knew her place." She could see women nodding, men looking uncomfortable, journalists scribbling frantically. "I'm not special. I'm not the only woman this has happened to. I'm just the one who got loud about it." Her voice was stronger now, steadier. "And I'm standing here today to tell you that the system that allowed my marriage to happen is still in place. It's still trapping women. It's still treating us like property instead of people." Someone in the back started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room was on its feet, applause washing over her like a wave. Alara gripped the podium and let herself feel it. The validation, the support, the sense that maybe, finally, she was doing something that mattered. After the speech, she was surrounded by people wanting to talk, women sharing their stories, men offering support or opposition in equal measure, journalists asking for interviews, and standing at the edge of the crowd, looking uncomfortable in a way that might have been pride or regret, or both, was Rowan. She made her way over after the crowd thinned. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to hear what you had to say." He looked tired, but somehow lighter than she remembered. "You were right. About everything." "I know. I've been thinking about what you said at the hearing, about choice, about honesty." He paused, choosing words carefully. "I've started reviewing all the marriage contracts in my family's records, looking for situations like yours. There are more than I thought." Alara studied him. "Why?" "Because you were right about something else too. I became someone I didn't like. Someone who valued money and position over basic human decency." He met her eyes. "I can't undo what I did to you, but maybe I can stop it from happening to someone else." "That doesn't fix us." "No, nothing fixes us. We're done, and we should be." He smiled, and it was genuinely sad. "But maybe we can both be better people separately than we were together." After he left, Beatrice appeared at her elbow. "That was unexpected." "He's trying, I'll give him that much." "Are you going to forgive him?" Alara thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But I don't have to forgive him to move forward. That's what I'm learning. The next 6 months were a blur of activity. The women's gathering grew into a formal organization, the Women's Contract Rights Alliance. They hired lawyers, published guides, lobbied for legal reforms. Alara found herself testifying before parliamentary committees, writing articles for newspapers, becoming someone she'd never imagined being. A voice, a force, someone who refused to be quiet. It wasn't easy. The opposition was fierce and well-funded. Men who benefited from the current system fought back hard. Alara received death threats. Her townhouse was vandalized. She was called every name imaginable in the press, but she kept going. Because for every person who hated her, there were two who needed her. Women who wrote to thank her. Girls who told her she'd inspired them to demand better. Families who'd renegotiated marriage contracts with her organization's help. And slowly, impossibly, things started to change. The council implemented new rules requiring full disclosure of financial terms in marriage contracts. Several prominent families publicly revised their practices. Women started demanding to see contracts before signing them, started asking questions, started refusing terms they didn't like. The system was bending. Not breaking, not yet, but bending under the pressure of truth. 1 year after the annulment, Alara received an invitation that made her hands shake. The Royal Academy of Law wanted to award her an honorary degree for her work in contract reform. "You have to accept," Beatrice insisted. "Do you understand what this means? They're legitimizing everything you've done, acknowledging it matters. They're also trying to domesticate me, make me respectable instead of radical. So be both. Take their recognition and use it to push harder." The ceremony was held in the Academy's Grand Hall, the same place where Alara had once attended events as the Silent Duchess of Thornfield. Now she walked across that stage as herself, Dr. Alara Ashford, advocate for women's rights, voice for the voiceless. She accepted the degree to thunderous applause, and when they asked her to speak, she didn't hold back. "This degree is an honor, but it's not mine alone. It belongs to every woman who's been brave enough to speak up, every woman who's challenged an unfair contract, every woman who's refused to be property." She looked out at the audience, at the powerful men who still ran everything, at the women scattered among them who were listening with hungry eyes. The work isn't done. It's barely started. Marriage reform is just one piece of a larger system that needs to change. And I promise you, we're not stopping here. More applause. Some of it enthusiastic, some grudging, but everyone was listening. After the ceremony, Alara found herself cornered by a young woman, maybe 19, with desperate eyes. "Lady Ashford, Dr. Ashford, I need help. My father wants to arrange my marriage to settle business debts, and I don't know what to do." Alara took her hand. "Come to our next meeting. Bring the contract if you can. We'll help you understand your options." "Will it work? Can I really say no?" "You can always say no. That's what I learned. The question is whether you're brave enough to deal with the consequences." The girl left with a meeting time and a spark of hope, and Alara felt that familiar mix of purpose and exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Sarah appeared with tea. "You should rest, my lady. You've been going nonstop for days." "I'm not a lady anymore, Sarah, just Alara. You'll always be my lady, but you're also the woman who changed everything." Sarah set down the tea with a smile. "And that's better than any title." That evening, Alara sat in her study surrounded by letters and legal documents and plans for the next campaign. The Women's Contract Rights Alliance was expanding into property law, inheritance rights, employment protections. Every victory opened up new fronts in the battle. Beatrice brought wine and companionship. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "You're happy. Actually, genuinely happy. For the first time since I've known you." Alara considered this. Was she happy? She was exhausted, frustrated, constantly fighting battles that seemed impossible to win. She'd lost her title, her position, her family's approval. She lived in a modest townhouse instead of a mansion. She wore simple clothes instead of silk gowns. But yes, she was happy. "I have a purpose," she said finally. "I'm doing something that matters. That's worth more than all the rest of it. Even if it's hard?" Especially because it's hard, easy things don't change anything. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah showed in an unexpected visitor, Victoria Ashworth, the woman whose dramatic appearance at the gala had started everything. "I hope I'm not intruding." Victoria looked uncertain, a far cry from her bold performance that night. I've been following your work, what you've built. It's remarkable. What do you want, Victoria? To apologize for that scene at the gala. I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you when you didn't deserve it. She twisted her hands together. You were a victim of the same system I was running from. I should have seen that. Alara studied her. You loved him, Rowan. I thought I did, but really, I loved the idea of freedom more. I loved that he was willing to let me go instead of caging me. Victoria smiled sadly. I didn't realize he'd just cage someone else instead. He's trying to do better now, if that matters. It does, but it doesn't undo the harm. Victoria pulled an envelope from her bag. I wanted to give you this. It's a donation to your alliance, and a story I wrote about my experience if you want to publish it. Sometimes the women who get away have a responsibility to help the ones still trapped. After Victoria left, Alara read the story. It was raw and honest and painful, an account of refusing marriage, facing social exile, rebuilding a life from nothing. It would resonate with women considering leaving their own situations. You're going to publish it, aren't you? Beatrice asked. Yes, along with mine, and anyone else's who's willing to share. Alara felt the idea crystallizing. A collection of stories, proof that survival is possible, that freedom is worth fighting for. The project took months. Women sent their stories, some signed, most anonymous. Tales of escape and survival, of small victories and crushing defeats, of courage in the face of impossible odds. Alara compiled them into a book, added resources and legal information, and published it through a small press willing to take the risk. Voices from the Cage, Women's Stories of Marriage, Money, and Freedom. It sold out the first printing in 2 weeks. Suddenly, Alara wasn't just the woman who'd challenged her own marriage. She was a publisher, an advocate, a symbol of resistance. The book was banned in some circles and required reading in others. It sparked debates, changed minds, gave women ammunition to demand better. And through it all, Alara kept showing up, kept speaking, kept fighting. 2 years after the annulment, she received a letter from her mother, the first communication they'd had since Catherine had slapped her and disowned her. Alara, I've been reading about your work, and I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. I'm sorry. I was wrong to let your father use you that way. I was wrong to prioritize reputation over your happiness. I was wrong to strike you for demanding the truth. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see what you've become, what you're doing, and I'm proud, prouder than I've ever been. Your mother Alara read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. It didn't fix everything, didn't undo the years of harm, but it was something, a crack in the wall, a possibility of healing. She wrote back, not to forgive, not yet, but to start a conversation. Because she'd learned that silence solved nothing, that the only way through pain was straight through it, speaking truth the whole way. On the 3rd anniversary of her annulment, the Women's Contract Rights Alliance held a celebration at the same hall where Alara had given her first speech. The room was packed with women who'd been helped by the organization, allies who'd supported the work, even a few reformed husbands who'd publicly revised their marriage practices. Alara stood to speak, looking out at faces she recognized, Beatrice and Sarah, Thomas Ridley, and Marcus Aldridge, Lady Margaret and Victoria. Even Rowan, standing at the back, quiet, but present. 3 years ago, I stood in a council chamber and demanded to be seen as a person instead of property. I didn't know if I'd win. I didn't know if anyone would care. I just knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The room was quiet, listening. Since then, we've helped over 300 women understand and challenge their marriage contracts. We've pushed through legal reforms in 4 provinces. We've published stories, changed minds, and proved that one voice speaking up can start something bigger than anyone imagined. She paused, feeling emotion clog her throat. But the work isn't done. There are still women trapped in contracts they didn't understand, still families treating daughters like assets, still a system that values money over humanity. So we keep going, we keep fighting, we keep speaking up until everyone understands that marriage should be a choice, not a transaction. The applause was deafening. But what moved Alara most was seeing young women in the crowd, teenagers, early 20s, looking at her with fierce determination. The next generation, ready to carry the fight forward. After the celebration, Alara found Rowan waiting by her carriage. That was a good speech? Thank you. They stood there awkwardly, two people who'd shared so much and so little. Finally, Rowan spoke. I'm getting married again. To someone I actually chose this time. Someone who knows everything and chose me anyway. Alara felt a pang, not jealousy exactly, but something complicated. I'm glad. Everyone deserves that chance. I wanted you to hear it from me first. And to tell you, I used your organization's contract review service, made sure everything was transparent and fair. Your lawyer said it was the most equitable marriage contract she'd ever seen. Despite everything, Alara smiled. That's progress. It's your influence. You changed how I think about marriage, about partnership, about treating people with basic human decency. He hesitated. I know we can't be friends, too much history, but I hope we can be allies, Alara finished. We can be allies in making sure no one else goes through what I did. I'd like that. After he left, Beatrice appeared. How are you feeling? Surprisingly okay. He's moving on. I've moved on. We're both better for it. Are you going to marry again? People keep asking. Alara laughed. Maybe someday, if I find someone who sees me as a partner instead of an acquisition, but I'm not in a hurry. I have too much work to do. That night, alone in her study, Alara looked at everything she'd built. The alliance, the book, the legal reforms, the lives changed. 3 years ago, she'd been suffocating in a marriage that was killing her slowly. Now she was alive in a way she'd never imagined possible. The cost had been high. She'd lost her title, her family's approval, her comfortable position in society. She'd gained enemies and scars and sleepless nights. But she'd also gained herself, her voice, her purpose, her freedom. A letter sat on her desk, delivered that afternoon. Another woman asking for help, for guidance, for hope. Alara picked up her pen and began to write. Dear friend, thank you for reaching out. Yes, I can help. Here's what you need to know. Outside her window, the city lights sparkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there were women still trapped, still suffering, still believing they had no choice. But they did have a choice, and Alara would spend the rest of her life making sure they knew it. She'd been called many things since leaving Rowan: troublemaker, radical, scandal, threat. She'd been the Duchess of Thornfield, playing a role in someone else's story. Now she was just Alara, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.